distinguished guest, welcome to another episode of Life on the Grid, hosted by Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish and Ben Schneider, host of Grid Encore. Tonight's guest, Ben Walton, assistant producer for Dirty Mo Media. Grab a drink, grab a bite, and enjoy this episode of Life on the Grid. Be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network on YouTube.
Here's the Uptown Charlotte skyline from the WBTV webcam. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Life on the Grid. My name is Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish, and with me is Ben Schneider from Grid Live Encore. A lot of fun things are happening in the sports world as we record this episode on Super Bowl week. Ben's Philadelphia Eagles will be competing in Super Bowl 57 against the Kansas City Chiefs. My Carolina Panthers finally hired our new head coach. It's our first quarterback in franchise history, ironically, Frank Wright. NBA trade deadline drama. Kyrie Irving traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Dallas Mavericks to join forces with Luka Doncic, and a late-night bombshell with the Nets trading Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns to team up with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Plus, we witnessed history when LeBron James passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the NBA's new all-time leading scorer. Ben, I'm not even going to ask you any questions about this. I'm just going to let you take it away and share any thoughts you have on these particular subjects because there's a lot happening.
Well, Kobe, they've said it's a great year to be a Philadelphia sports fan, and I guess in a lot of ways that's true. A lot of cities would love to be where we're at, in terms of when you average out the performance of our teams. I got a little bit of a show and tell for you guys tonight here. We had two teams, became the first city to have two teams lose their championships on the same day with the Philadelphia Union in MLS Cup and the Philadelphia Phillies in the World Series this year. And actually, if you trace it back to the USFL season in 2022, the Philadelphia Stars made the championship game and lost that as well. So if you guys follow me on Twitter, you might have seen this tweet that I put out not so long ago, tracking Philadelphia teams in their respective championships in 2022. The Stars lost the USFL championship, which aired on Fox, by the way. The Union later that year lost MLS Cup, which also aired on Fox. And then you didn't even have to change the channel. The lead out to MLS Cup was Game 6 of the World Series, which the Philadelphia Phillies lost on Fox. And now we have our Philadelphia Eagles looking to try to replicate their Super Bowl 52 success. They're back in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is back on Fox. So we're hoping that this trend finally goes in a different direction here and that the Eagles can finally break through, because I think it's our last hope when you look at the 76ers. I don't see them getting out of a second round. They haven't been out of a second round since they went to the finals in 2001. They seem like pretenders to me rather than contenders for a championship. And then, of course, it's been over 17,000 days since my Flyers have won the Stanley Cup. So I really have no hope for them right now. They're seventh in the division right now. Kobe, I think actually, I know you're not as much of a hockey guy, but I think your Hurricanes are the second best team in the Eastern Conference right now, if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan at all, behind the Boston Bruins. So there might be some success coming your way in Carolina sports on some fronts this year. I know your Panthers have a little bit of hope with Frank Wright coming in. Of course, he was our offensive coordinator when we won the Super Bowl in Philadelphia just a few years ago. So I think everybody in Philly was happy for you guys that you made that hire there. I know we were talking a little bit before we started recording about your Hornets maybe just tanking for the draft lottery this year. Not a lot of good things going on in that franchise right now, but there's always hope for the future. So we'll see what happens on that front. But in the NBA as a whole, of course, Kobe, like you mentioned, it's been a really dramatic trade deadline that we're going through right now this year. And of course, we're taping this on Thursday, February 9th, and trade deadlines later this afternoon in just a few hours. Obviously, we'll be we're going to try to get this up on Tuesday, I think, when it goes up. So, by then we'll have a Super Bowl winner, and we'll see what that ends up being, if it's the Eagles or the Chiefs or whatever. But I can't imagine it's going to get more dramatic than it got, I guess, technically speaking, earlier this morning at 1 a.m. with Kevin Durant going to the Phoenix Suns. And I got to tell you, I really, every year I felt like this is Chris Paul's last best chance at an NBA championship. Kevin Durant coming to Phoenix, I think that is easily made them maybe the number 2 favorite in the West behind the Denver Nuggets. So a great lineup that they've got now, especially with CP3 and Devin Booker. But the Mavericks again as well, signing Kyrie Irving, I think, is always a risk. But, you get Kyrie and Luka Doncic on the court together. There's no telling what they can do So the Western Conference is absolutely stacked right now, and it's very, very close. I think if you look at the Lakers, I think they're kind of hovering around the 12 or 13 seed, but even then, they're only like 5 or 6 games out of the 4 seed, if I'm doing the math right here. So it's very, very tight, and can swing either way in favor of one team or another, within just the next couple of weeks, let alone the next 2 months that we've got to finish out the regular season. So it's going to be very interesting there. And then, of course, Kobe, like you mentioned, great to see a really historic moment on Tuesday night with LeBron James passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Thankfully, Kareem got to be in the building to witness that, and they had a nice moment on the court together at the end of the third quarter. So really, really impressive stuff from LeBron James, what he's doing in year 20 at age 38. There's no telling how much more he can do. I think he's got another 3, maybe even 5 years left in the league if he wants it. He's kind of reminding me of Tom Brady, continuing to play, not just continuing to play, at this age and how many seasons he's been in the league, but at the level that he's playing at. People talked about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and what he was doing in his 20th and final season compared to LeBron James. And we know this almost certainly, Lord willing, won't be his final season. I know a major goal of LeBron's is to be able to share the court with his sons. So that's going to be very interesting to see where that goes going forward. But the Lakers are, a very interesting case right now. Obviously, Russell Westbrook just got shipped out of there. So, I know the team is not quite where LeBron would probably want them to be this year, but still, from an individual standpoint, a great, great achievement for him. And lots going on in the sports world right now. You're absolutely right, Kobe. So it's going to be interesting to follow over these next couple of months.
Yes, for sure. There are going to be a lot of things to follow, and I definitely wish your Philadelphia Eagles the best of luck. And the Super Bowl this week is going to be a great game. Watching Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts go at it, have no idea who's going to win. I don't even know if I want to make a prediction. I hate that someone has to lose because I really like watching both of these teams play. Love, big fan of Patrick Mahomes, one of my favorite players, and like to see that Jalen Hurts is proving all the naysayers wrong about his game, and he's really developed into one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now. In regards to the Panthers, I have to say I think two things can be true. You can be very excited about the hire for Frank Reich, and you can also be disappointed in Steve Wilkes for not getting this opportunity. But I'm glad that Wilkes is going to be getting that opportunity out in San Francisco to be the new defensive coordinator. And looking at Kyle Shanahan's record of having defensive coordinators on his staff, I think Steve Wilkes might finally get a real opportunity to be a head coach. I know he was only the head coach in Arizona for a year, but kind of got the raw end of the deal there. Wasn't really given a chance to show what he could do as a coach. But as you look at the San Francisco 49ers, their defensive coordinator was Robert Saleh. Where is he now? He's the head coach of the New York Jets. And then previous defensive coordinator, DeMeco Ryans, where is he now? He recently returned to the team that brought him into the league. The Houston Texans, the hometown hero of Houston, is finally a head coach in the NFL. So if history serves well, then we could expect Steve Wilkes to eventually become a head coach as well. So I'm really happy for it that he's getting a great opportunity out in the Bay Area. Disappointed that he wasn't able to, become the permanent head coach of the Carolina Panthers, but wishing Mr. Wilkes well. Did a lot of great things in a season that we thought was completely lost. I know, Ben, having private conversation with you early in the season, I said, man, it's over. We're going to be tanking for the number 1 pick. But to be in the playoff hunt, playing a meaningful game in late December, that's something I did not expect at all. So really kudos to Wilt for the job he was able to do and really coaching up those guys. But overall, really excited to see what Frank Reich can do for the first time in our franchise history. We have an offensive-minded head coach. We've always had defensive-minded coaches. So looking forward to seeing what Reich can do with the offense. We already have a really good defense. He made a really brilliant hire, getting the former Broncos defensive coordinator, Ejiro Evero, who's considered one of the top defensive coordinators in the NFL. So it'll be fun to see what he's going to do with all the great pieces we have there. And as for Reich, we have a lot to do on offense. Hopefully we'll be able to get us a true franchise quarterback, because I'm getting sick and tired of playing musical chairs with all the quarterbacks that we have. It's a revolving door, and we have no idea who's going to be our quarterback week in and week out. Because this past season we went through PJ Walker, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and then we also had a guy from the practice squad, Easton, as well, who came in and played. So we've had a lot of things going on in the quarterback room since we ended up moving on from Cam Newton. So hopefully the Carolina Panthers will be able to figure that out. I really would like, my personal preference, I'd like to get one of those top 2 quarterbacks in this year's NFL draft. Alabama's Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud from Ohio State. Those will be my top two preferences. I really don't want to try to get a veteran quarterback. No offense to like the Derek Carrs of the world or anything like that, but I think it would be in the Panthers' best interest to get a rookie quarterback that Frank Reich can develop, and we can have our next signal caller for the next decade or so. And in regards to all the NBA trade deadline drama, it's been really crazy seeing what's going on. The Western Conference is absolutely stacked right now. I'm looking at the standings as of right now. You got the Nuggets on top, and then you got the Grizzlies, and one of the big surprises this year, Sacramento Kings are currently have the third best record in the Western Conference, and then the Mavericks and the Suns fourth and fifth, and the Clippers. It's gonna be a mega battle come playoff times, and then you still got the Golden State Warriors, who are actually down in ninth, who are trying to improve, get better, and Lakers hopefully trying to turn their season around as well. There's just a lot of things going on in the Western Conference right now. It's gonna be mega competitive. There's still a lot of great talent in the Eastern Conference, but this year gonna be, well, for the rest of this season, gonna be paying attention to what's happening out west. Kyrie and Luka, is gonna be interesting to see how those two get along, and then a new super team out in the Valley of the Sun in Phoenix with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and KD and DeAndre Ayton. It's gonna be really crazy to see who ends up coming out on top of the West, because there's like so many different teams out there I can see going to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I don't think they're going to win a championship, but I am pulling for the Sacramento Kings. I know those fans have not had very much to cheer about over the last couple of decades, and I believe now that the Seattle Mariners made the playoffs in Major League Baseball this past year, I believe the Kings now have the longest drought in the four major North American sports leagues in terms of when they were last in the postseason. So, like I said, I think this team's already overachieving as it is. I don't expect them to be a title contender, but if they can get into the playoffs and maybe even make things interesting, the first round series, whoever they end up playing, because again, there's a lot of really good teams that have been shuffled down there with injuries and stuff. Like, I expect the Warriors, when they're at full strength, to be better than a 9 seed or a play-in team, and maybe the Lakers, if they make some moves later this afternoon, who knows what they could look like. But there's a lot that still needs to be sorted out, and it's going to be very interesting to watch it all happen.
There's definitely a lot happening in the sports world. We'll pick up this conversation at another time. So let's introduce our guest. He's a college student at UNC Charlotte, communication studies major with a concentration in public relations and a minor in film studies. Right now, he's working as an assistant producer at Dirty Mo Media. Everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Ben Walton. Ben, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Awesome. Great to hear. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure, Ben. We're really excited to chat with you tonight and have you on this episode of Life on the Grid. And one of our recent guests, my colleague Nathan Coleman from the Podium Finish, had a very impressive resume. After looking at your resume, I can say it's equally impressive. So I know we'll touch on a lot of intriguing topics today. Let's start off talking about Dirty Mo Media. For any viewers out there who've never heard of Dirty Mo Media, it's a media company owned by Dale Earnhardt Jr. and founded by Mike Davis, who currently serves as the president and executive producer of Dirty Mo Media. They have many interesting podcasts you can listen to and enjoy, with a lot of great personalities from the motorsports industry discussing topics that will interest you. Let us know down in the chat below. Have you ever listened to Dirty Mo Media produced podcasts, and which one is your favorite? To name some of those podcasts, they have the Dale Jr. Download with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Mike Davis, talking to all different personalities in motorsport. And that's personally my favorite one from Dirty Mo Media. Door Bumper Clear podcast is co-hosted by NASCAR spotters Brett Griffin, Freddie Kraft, and TJ Majors, alongside motorsports industry insider Casey Boat. Then the Speed Street podcast, co-hosted by IndyCar driver Connor Daly and comedian Joey Molinaro. Plus the Next Level podcast with Andrew Curlin and Dirty Mo Doe with Steve Letarte. However, the podcast that just debuted with a lot of momentum is Actions Detrimental with Denny Hamlin, who gives his honest, bold, and unfiltered opinion on subjects you won't find anywhere else. Hamlin definitely likes to speak his mind, even if it ruffles a few feathers. Ben, before we talk about the specific podcasts you've worked on, how did you land with Dirty Mo Media, and what's it like working with some of the biggest well-known personalities in NASCAR?
Yeah, so I started working there last January. My friend Jason Schultz, he's was the head producer at Door Bumper Clear, and now has transitioned over to the social media side. I actually started working on his podcast that him and Andrew Curlin did, called Redhead Racing Radio. They kind of wanted help editing so they could kind of focus on some other things. So I started doing that, and then they kind of wanted some more help on the editing side of Dope Bumper Clear. So he basically was like, would you be interested in the position? And I said, yeah. So I kind of slowly basically just started doing that. And then it turned into, well, like you could come in and start helping with like cutting videos, putting social stuff together. And then it basically just grew into, I was basically just there one day and Mike wants me to come into his office. He's like, hey, we have this new podcast we're bringing in called Speed Street, and we'd love you to produce it if you're interested. So it basically just kind of catapulted from there, and now I kind of do a variety of things.
This sounds pretty cool. And during your time at Dirty Mo Media, you've produced and edited podcasts, mainly been the producer of the Speed Street podcast. You've had the pleasure of working with Connor Daly and Joey Molinaro. Speaking of Daly, it was recently announced that he's going to attempt the Daytona 500 with Floyd Mayweather's money team in the number 50 Bitnow.com Chevrolet Camaro. Additionally, we could see him in more NASCAR Cup Series races later this season. There are plans for him to do what they're calling the Texas two-step, run the Cup race on the road course at Coda, and switch gears back to IndyCar on the 1.5 mile Texas Motor Speedway Oval the following week. Then when NASCAR and IndyCar do the doubleheader race weekend on the IMS road course, Daly plans to run both races. They're calling it the Daly Double. Daly's remaining Cup schedule will be announced at a later date as he continues his role as a full-time IndyCar driver with Ed Carpenter Racing. Let's hold off on your experience at the Indianapolis 500 for a moment. We'll get to that after this question. So talking about your experiences, at Dirty Mo Media, what has your experience been like personally working with Connor and Joey on the Speed Street podcast? And do you like Connor's chances of racing his way into the Daytona 500 with the money team?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I was fans of both of them even before I listened to their podcasts, and then it was actually probably about 2 weeks before Mike came with the offer that Dirty Mo Media was gonna kind of inherit Speed Street. So I was already a fan of both of them. I've been an IndyCar fan for a while, and Joey's stuff is really funny. I've always enjoyed his impressions, and it's been great. I mean, they're both awesome guys. They get the content space. They get, they want to grow the podcast, which is awesome. So working with them, and they're open to all sorts of ideas. And yeah, I think Connor's insight to the sport is pretty unmatched. And I think he's one of the best personalities, if not the best, in IndyCar right now. He gets what the sport needs to do to grow. And he's been in it for so long with his family ties and everything. And his knowledge come over from F1 in his early days is pretty apparent of how he just brings himself, and he just wants to. I think he's honestly, if I hope he stays racing as long as he can, but if he ends up ever being just a straight up media personality, I think he would do great. And I think Joey pairs well with him because Joey's kind of a newer ish type racing fan. He grew up in Indy, but he's been getting NASCAR recently. I think he's a good pairing with Connor to kind of if Connor's explaining something about technicalities or something with new rules or anything, Joey can come in and serve as hey, so what does that mean? What does this mean for fans going forward? So I think it's a great pairing.
Yes, for sure. You mentioned Connor Daly, been a really great personality, in my opinion, one of the great personalities in motorsports. And doing what he's doing, no experience racing on NASCAR stock car in a super speedway, trying to go down to the Daytona 500 and race his way in with the money team. As Ben, looking at the entry list for Daytona 500, it's stacked. Connor's gonna have quite a challenge. He's gonna have to try to go out there, beat Jimmy Johnson, Zane Smith, Chandler Smith, Austin Hill, Travis Pastrana, others. This is really, really stacked for Daytona for this year's Daytona 500 to try to make it into the Great American Race, either by being one of the top two fastest open cars or racing his way in through the duels. Can you describe what type of challenge that Connor is going to be facing to try to get into the Great American Race? Another money team was able to do it last year with Kaz Grala, so that team is more than capable of getting into the show. And Connor's a driver who can definitely get the job done.
Yeah, I agree. I think he talked about it on Speed Street this week. He really doesn't have anything to lose with this opportunity. His sponsors been backing him. I mean, they back the whole IndyCar program, and they're helping him do the 6 to 7 Cup races, which he's doing this year. So he was saying, he's I don't even I'm gonna hop in the car and qualify and do his one lap. He's that's the first time I'm gonna be in a car since he was in the Roval. So it's gonna be tough for sure. But I think he's going to be aggressive during the duels. I think he's going to go for it. He's got nothing to lose. It's a tough field. I think he they're definitely going to be the smallest team that's trying. I know there's some couple other ones that we're considering going down the entry list, but like they were even being like, well, do we even really want to do this with, with how stacked it is? I mean, like you said, you're going to have going up against like guys like Colleague Racing, 2311, Jimmy Johnson with Legacy MC. So it's going to be tough, but I think he's just going to go in there with a good attitude and just try his best.
Yes, for sure. And you mentioned Connor has nothing to lose. All he's gonna go out there and just do the best job he's can. And you mentioned his sponsor, which is BitNile. I was reading earlier in the week that there's been teams from Formula One, other IndyCar teams and NASCAR who've been trying to take BitNile away from Daly, but the sponsor's been extremely loyal to him, and that's something you don't really see a lot in motorsports today. With the sponsor being loyal, typically if they're offered an opportunity that could be better for their brand, they might hop on it, but instead BitNile's kind of shoot away everybody else who wants to get involved with them because they're committed to Connor, and that's something that certainly has to be really exciting to Connor, because I know before he got this opportunity to go full-time in IndyCar with Ed Carpenter Racing, he really struggled for a long time to get sponsorship to be able to compete at this level and also to race in the NASCAR Cup Series as well. So right now, Connor Daly and BitNile, they have a really, really good partnership going. We're really excited to see him race full-time in IndyCar and also part-time in the NASCAR Cup Series, because it's really rare nowadays to see a driver competing in NASCAR and IndyCar in the same season. And now onto the greatest spectacle in racing. Ben, understand last year you got to go on the trip of a lifetime to the Indianapolis 500 thanks to Dirty Mo Media. I saw some of the photos you posted from your first Indy 500 online, and it looks like you had a wonderful time that you'll never forget. So in your own words, how was your trip attending the biggest Crown Jewel Motorsports event in the world with Dirty Mo Media?
Yeah, that was, like you said, it was an experience of a lifetime. I didn't think I found out I was going probably until like 2 or 3 weeks before that. So it was a pretty quick turnaround on just planning content and what we were going to do. So, and that was when we still had the plan of announcing Speed Street that weekend. So it was that part of it, but also being able to take in the whole experience. I think it's the biggest event in the world, or like at least the biggest motorsports event in the world. So just go in there and take it in, and you hear, you see the crowd on TV and everything, and you see how packed and everything it is. It just doesn't do it justice. The weekend was great. Going to Carb Day and getting to talk to a few different drivers was awesome. But I think once we got there at like 5 a.m. or 5:30 in the morning on Sunday, and you're just walking in and there's just thousands and thousands of people just everywhere that early. And then when we got to go on grid pre-race, and you just look down the front stretch, and it's just a sea of people on the track. You got people up on the grandstands to your left, and then you look down into like 3 and 4, and it keeps going and going. It's unreal. I definitely, like, when they were getting ready to do the pre-race ceremonies, just kind of sit there and you take it in. It was an awesome experience. I think we're planning on going again this year, but yeah, it's something, it's hard to describe for sure.
Yeah, definitely quite an experience that you have trouble finding the words to describe how it was. And in terms of work, like what type of work were you able to do there at the Indy 500, despite taking in all the experience of just the awe? It's the greatest spectacle in racing. Is one of the biggest motorsports extravaganzas of the year. We know Memorial Day weekend is really special. As one of our former colleagues at Great Network once said, it's the greatest day because you have breakfast in Monaco, lunch in Indy, and dinner in Charlotte, just racing all day long, nonstop, like a true motorsports fan's dream. So I really like to hear a little bit more about like some of the different details you did with Dirty Mo at the Indy 500.
Yeah, for sure. So our kind of number one goal when we got there was just to try to plan. We shot, I think, one video with Joey and Connor, kind of introducing them, because this is really IndyCar's or Dirty Mo Media's first like content around Indy and doing IndyCar stuff other than having IndyCar guests on the download. So for us, it was just trying to get their name out there. I think most people knew who Connor was in the racing scape, but just introducing Dirty Mo's audience to Connor and then getting Joey involved as well. So that was kind of the number one goal. We shot some stuff with them, and then kind of the rest of the weekend, we basically just kind of interviewed drivers, just kind of some fun content, just to kind of get some more awareness to it, because ultimately that's IndyCar's biggest race of the year. So if we can we wanted to capitalize on doing content with them to kind of carry that the rest of the year. So yeah, mainly just shooting a lot of video and stuff. We got some good B-roll of the track and everything. So
Yeah. Sound like you were pretty busy. Did a lot of great things, content wise, and all of that. Really enjoyed chatting with you about all of your experiences with Dirty Mo Media. But I'm gonna step to the side now, and I'll let Ben S talk with Ben W. It's a big conversation between the two Bens.
Ben, it's great to meet you. I understand you've been a huge fan of the sport for a long time, even before you got the chance to work in NASCAR. I understand you're from the state of Minnesota. It's not really a state where we'd expect to see a major NASCAR presence when you compare it to a state like North Carolina, I suppose. I know one of the most well-known racetracks in Minnesota is Elko Speedway, but you guys also have another young prospect from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, who's currently making a name for himself on short tracks. We'll see him in the ARCA Menards Series this year with Joe Gibbs Racing and Toyota, as well as a few Truck Series starts with Tricon Garage, and that's William Sawalich. So growing up in Minnesota, how did you get interested in the world of motorsports? And then how excited are you to see an intriguing young gun like William on a path to doing great things in the sport from your home state?
Yeah, Minnesota definitely isn't traditionally what you think would be a racing state. I think once you kind of get into it and you go by the tracks, like the dirt track scene, I think there's one, I always forget the name of it. It's kind of right on the border of Minnesota and Wisconsin. That's pretty popular. Elko, obviously, we used to have a short track called Raceway Park. That was probably 20 minutes for me. That was really big. And they kind of did more of the traditional, like late model legend stuff. But as far as where I got my journey started in racing, I don't even remember specifically. All I remember is like my dad watched NASCAR, and I mean, I was in diapers watching it. And there's this photo of me and this like Jeff Gordon baby holder, and I'm just, playing with the little cars and stuff on it. So I just grew up watching NASCAR my whole life. I had family that was into it, so it was just something I didn't really know any different. So, and I mean, the big step for me too was when I was 5, I started racing go-karts too. I had a friend of mine that I guess it was our neighbor. He and his dad's family kind of co-owned a go-kart track about an hour from us. So, and his parents, my parents, really good friends. So one day they just decided to take us out there because they knew we were NASCAR fans and everything. And a funny story about this is like, I've never driven anything. I was about 5 or 6. And I remember that day very vaguely because they like got us to the track. We watched my friend race. And then I remember it was about to like thunderstorm like 30 minutes after the races got done. So as soon as they got done, they did the trophy ceremonies, and like they like ran me over, and I remember just kind of getting fitted for a suit, and they were walking out of the grid, warming up the cart, and they just like plopped me in, and they're like, all right, well, like gas is on the right, brake is on the left. Like, and you kind of, the grid's like up on a hill, and you drive down a hill, and it like puts you onto the track. So I just remember hopping in there. I just like went down the hill and turned right. And my friend's dad told my dad, he's like, well, like you can't really, the cart, where we tuned down the cart a little bit, like he's either going to turn right and he's going to make it through the first corner and then not use the brakes, and that'll be the end of it, or he's just going to go straight down the hill and he's just not going to turn, and he'll go off in the grass and he'll be fine. So went down the hill, I floored it, went down the straightaway, and I hit the first like tight corner, let off the gas, went on the brake, and like I've never driven anything. So, and just went around. I did about 3 or 4 laps. I got off, and then as soon as I got off, it started hailing, and we went back, and they're like, yeah, are you sure he hasn't driven anything before? And he's like, no, first time. So it from that point on, it became we got a cart and I started racing. So being around that environment as well got me into that.
Well, at the top of the show, Kobe and I discussed several sports-related topics, from my Philadelphia Eagles going to the Super Bowl to all the madness in the NBA trade deadline and what's been happening in the last 24 hours especially. So what are some of your favorite sports and teams to follow? Do you stay loyal to your Minnesota sports teams, and do you have any other hobbies away from the racetrack?
Yeah, I am a Vikings fan, as stressful as that can be. I know your Eagles definitely routed us earlier in the season, so that was tough. But definitely, I'd say number 1 team would be Vikings. I follow the Timberwolves and the Twins when they start to kind of get on a roll. It's just so tough with those franchises. I know Timberwolves are kind of on a roll right now. They just had a big trade. Twins a little bit. I actually lived in California for a few years, so when I went out there, the Warriors were still pretty bad, and so I wasn't a huge Timberwolves fan at the time. So I started following them, and then they obviously went on that run kind of around like 2015. And then I picked up the Giants too, because obviously they started winning. So you can call me a bandwagon, I guess, but I lived there for a few years, so I got to go to games in person. So I'd maybe count that not as much, but maybe a little bit. So Vikings, Timberwolves, warm weather season with them when they're good, and Giants and Warriors. Sometimes the Wild, but not as much.
Well, I've been 40 minutes south of Philadelphia my entire life here in Delaware, so I'd like to stay loyal to my local teams here. But I actually see a lot of similarities between the history of the Eagles and the Vikings, some teams that I think have had some good amount of success over the years, but breaking that final barrier and getting that Super Bowl was tough for us. I know you guys are still waiting for that as well, and we'll see. Maybe this time next week we'll be talking about another Super Bowl for the Eagles, or maybe the Chiefs will get it done with a guy that was the Eagles head coach for many, many years in Andy Reid. So it's going to be an exciting game for sure. Now, here's something that we like asking pretty much every guest that comes on this show. It's pretty open-ended. What's one thing that most people probably don't know about you?
Ooh, that's a good one. One thing people don't know about me. Usually, so I like in school growing up, I used the racing thing because, again, the Minnesota thing, nobody knows about racing. And then once I got to high school, I had a friend of mine that I had two friends that I raced with that went to high school. So I actually kind of defaulted to that. But I guess I'll go with this one. I've lived in about 5 different states. I guess that kind of makes me unique. I think I've kind of been around the country a little bit. So I've done a lot of traveling. So I'll go with that, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. Like I said, I've been living in Delaware my whole life. I went to college up in the New England area. So actually, if you want to talk about the Super Bowl, my freshman year was the first time Eagles. Well, not the first time, I guess the first time really in my adult life that the Eagles were in the Super Bowl. I know there was the Eagles-Patriots Super Bowl when I was a little kid before I was really starting to follow. But it was interesting because all my friends back home rooting for the Eagles, all my friends up in the college area rooting for the Patriots. So that was kind of
in Minnesota too. It was that. I was thinking
and the Vikings were in the NFC Championship game that year as well. So that was definitely an interesting time for me. But I would like to do more traveling. So I'm glad that you've gotten those experiences for yourself. Now I think Kobe's going to come back in here and talk about. Speaking of college, actually, this is a nice segue. Your time at UNC Charlotte. So we'll let him get into that.
Thank you, Ben. And I also agree with you. I want to travel more as well. It's been a while since I've traveled. I think the last time I traveled was spring 2000. Well, actually traveled a long distance was spring 2015 when I went to Toronto, Canada, and Niagara Falls. It's been such a long time, almost a decade. Hard to believe. So really looking forward to getting out there and seeing more of the world. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that in the upcoming years ahead. And Ben, I first came across you because we had two things in common. Number one, we both had a deep passion for motorsports. And number two, we both chose UNC Charlotte to continue our educations after high school. I know you're close to finishing up in communications with a focus on public relations and film studies too. And during your time at UNC Charlotte, you've gotten pretty involved on campus. You started off as a staff writer for 49ers Times, which happened during a time when I made an appearance on the Burning It Down Racing podcast with you and Bryson Foster. Also, you've been able to do some pretty cool stuff with the Charlotte 49ers athletic department, specifically with the football team, serving as a video production intern and content creation intern. Really cool being able to have 2 internships there. Can you share what responsibilities you had in those roles and some of the biggest things you've learned from those experiences?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally forgot we had you on the podcast. That was fun. I think that was right during COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was right during COVID when there was nothing else really happening.
Yeah. No, Bryce and I started that up. Just we were planning on doing it kind of right before COVID hit. We were going to do it in person, and then COVID hit, and I went back to Minnesota for about a year and a half, and we just did virtually. So, But as far as when I got there, kind of when I got to college, I was kind of wanting to go down more like a traditional like PR social media route in motorsports. And I was actually interested in doing some radio stuff too. And so a bunch of us, I was in the communication studies learning community. So we kind of did some like specialized classes with a certain group just to get to know some people. So there's a lot of people that did the Niner Times, and I wrote a couple articles and stuff in high school in this program I was in. So joined the Niner Times. I did some NASCAR writing, and I think I wrote like some golf stuff. Those are my 2 main. I enjoy writing. I didn't want to do it as a career, and I kind of was just doing it as like a side thing. And then the football team posted something on their Instagram, I think right around January of 2020. They're looking for video interns basically. And I kind of thought it would be more of like a creative video thing. And I kind of got into it, and I got the interview, and I got a couple days later, they called me back and said, yeah, I'd love to have you on. So I did that from like first week in February to basically up until COVID hit. I think we were getting ready to do the spring game. Then like a couple weeks is when COVID hit. So main job I did there was I was more of like a coach's film video assistant. So we'd go in and film practices. And then I did help with like a little bit of creative stuff. That was more when I came back for my junior year in 2021. So COVID hit, I basically ex-nayed all that. And then I came back, kind of picked that up again. Again, with the coaches film stuff. Then once the season started, we kind of helped like a little bit with some social media stuff. They didn't really quite have the social media team that they did now. So they were just kind of looking for help that they could. I got to travel as well, which is really awesome. I think 2021 season, I went to every away game except I think it was Georgia State and ODU. So I think I traveled about 4 or 5 times. So that was super awesome opportunity to get to go see the different college campuses that we got to and just kind of experience what it's like traveling with the team. Yeah, and then when I switched over to athletics, beginning of this or last semester in the fall, I decided to kind of end my time with the football team. It was great. It's just I had the opportunity to come up with Clutch Studios and then Dirty Mo eventually. So that's a little more condensed. It's kind of similar to what I was doing on game day with that. If I wasn't doing coaches film, I was on the sideline filming stuff for highlights. So I basically sign up for games. I show up, I help film pre-game, during the game, and then sometimes I'll kind of help with like some video edits. My boss needs it. A lot of times that's just work I put on my own Instagram, just kind of my own portfolio. So that's been great because the schedule has been a little more condensed and I don't have to be there, Monday through Saturday at like 9 a.m. for practice. I can just kind of show up for games and I get to do a wide range of sports. I've done football, basketball, volleyball, getting ready to baseball and softball season's coming up. So I'm super excited about that because I haven't done that. So it's just provide an extra opportunity.
That's good. You're definitely getting quite a well-rounded experience, being around all of these different types of sport. You're not just focused on one or two, but pretty much all of them, getting to see so many different things, and really cool that you got to travel to other college campuses as well, getting to see other parts of America that you may not have been able to see otherwise. And as you know, the Charlotte 49ers football team is going through a transition period right now. Unfortunately, things didn't work out with Will Healy, so the university decided to go in a different direction by hiring new head coach Biff Poggi. He previously served on Jim Harbaugh's staff at the University of Michigan. But before that, he made a name for himself at the high school level at St. Francis Academy in Baltimore. So in your opinion, do you think Coach Poggi is the right leader to change the culture at Charlotte and make our program more competitive as we enter the American Athletic Conference next season?
Yeah, I think Will Healy did a great job for kind of what the football program needed. Like they needed a good spark. Like he took him to a bowl game, got him winning some games, and then it kind of fell off towards the end. But I think for what he had to work with, I think Will did a great job. And I think he just got hired as like a senior advisor at UCF to that program. So great for him. But yeah, the Biff hire, I think, caught all of us kind of off guard because we're like, who's this guy? And he's coming from Michigan, and we weren't quite sure what his role was. And reading into it, yeah, with what he did at St. Francis was super awesome. And what his role was at Michigan, I think is going to be super crucial, taking those experiences to bring to Charlotte, because it's definitely a program that's getting reworked a lot, going to the American, like you said. And I think just the amount of recruits that are coming, and I think he's bringing a whole new spark to the program, even just from what I've seen and the people that they're going to bring in. I think it's going to be a great step, because I do think they are, like, for what the culture is with that football team and just the campus, I think it can do really well with football. It just needs more time. And again, it's such a young program. I think it started in like 2013, 2012, something around there. So it's just such a new program. But I think what Biff can bring to the table with recruiting wise, and it sounds like he's going to be really adamant about running the ball and having a tough defense to play against. So I think that'll be super good, because I mean, our defense or the football team has been pretty abysmal so the past few years. So I think having that step forward in that, I think it's going to be super great. So I'm excited for the season.
Yeah, same here. Also excited for change, but I also agree with what you said about Will Healy. I felt like he did a really good job, all things considered, and for the first time in the history of our young FBS program, he made Charlotte fun. I'm really gonna miss Club Lit. Dancing in the locker room after wins with his shirt off. Yeah, it was just a whole lot of fun, taking us to our first bowl game in our football history. to the Bahamas Bowl. I watched that on TV. Unfortunately, ended up losing the game, but it was really cool. Said the Charlotte 49ers in a bowl game, and hopefully under new coach Biff Poggi, he can, going to bowl games can become regular for the Charlotte 49ers because, the Queen City, look at all the talent that you have coming out of high school in that city. And it's a shame that, we're the one knock on the Charlotte 49ers program is that we're not able to keep a lot of that talent from Charlotte, inside the city and go to UNC Charlotte. I understand the draw of, wanting to go to an ACC school. I understand the draw of wanting to go to App State. I understand wanting to go to an SEC school, because you may not be able to get that opportunity again. But also at the same time, I think going to UNC Charlotte, staying in the Queen City, there can be a lot of great opportunity. I know I've seen Coach Poggi talk about this in some of his previous interviews during the early days as coach of the Charlotte 49ers football team, about wanting to recruit very hardly in the Charlotte area to make sure that talent is not going to leave the city. Right now, it's a really exciting time to be a fan of the Charlotte 49ers football team because we're going through this transition, and hopefully Poggi will really get this program moving forward in the right direction because everybody at UNC Charlotte deserves a football team that they can truly be proud of and being competitive, because going to the American Athletic Conference is going to be a huge step up from Conference USA. But if anybody's going to be able to get our program ready, it's certainly going to be Coach Poggi. I mean, coming from winning pedigree at St. Francis, also been on Jim Harbaugh's staff at Michigan, there's a lot that he can bring to this program that we haven't had before under our previous head coaches. And as your time at as a UNC Charlotte student comes to an end, do you have a favorite memory you'll take with you from campus, and how has the school helped prepare you to take the next step in your professional life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say my favorite memory would probably be when there's the Duke game. That was my first home football game I got to work, and when they beat their first Power 5 team, that was super cool to be a part of. And because I think everybody's going to bet against us, which totally makes sense. And just from the start, the game started off really close, and everybody just kind of kept chipping away at it, and the crowd was just unreal. And to end in overtime with how it did, that was a super cool moment, and I don't think this one I'll ever forget. So that probably have to be my favorite moment.
Yeah, that's definitely a great moment. I remember one of my favorite moments attending UNC Charlotte football games. I attended the Charlotte and App State game at home, and although we got blown out that day, that was quite an electric atmosphere. Just being there, seeing all the Charlotte fans and all of the black and yellow as well from App. It was just such an unreal atmosphere. And I forgot who we played in this other game, but I attended the very first, I believe it was the first primetime televised game in the history of Charlotte 49ers football history. That was certainly a pretty cool experience. I'm glad you've been able to make the most of your college experience at UNC Charlotte. And next, going to bring Ben Snyder back on to talk to you about Clutch Studios and some more interesting topics.
Well, thank you for that, Ben. I enjoyed hearing about your college experience and all the things you were a part of there. Next, we want to discuss your time as a studio intern at Clutch Studios. During this particular internship, I understand you were able to create promotional video content for Joey Logano's social media. So can you go into more detail about your Clutch Studios internship and how cool of an experience it was to be able to do that with the Logano team?
Yeah, so Clutch Studios is, for people that don't know, it's kind of like, at its heart, it's Joey Logano's kind of business compound, but at the same time, it's also like a production company and his racing businesses kind of all roped into one. But so I was a studio intern there. I started there, that would have been October of last year, I believe, and then went until about April. So yeah, that basically, I worked underneath a guy named Matt Peeler. He was awesome, taught me a lot and everything. Kind of helped him more with some of the creative stuff, and because he kind of ran a lot of their social media, it helped some Joey stuff. So I got to kind of assist with a lot of those promotions and stuff, and kind of did some graphics and stuff for even like their foundation. So that was really cool. Definitely exposed me to a lot of different vast areas of what they do. Even just like I think the first big productions I got to kind of help with was when Fox does like their hanger shoot, and they do all like the B-roll and interviews at the beginning of the season to get their headshots. So that was super cool to be a part of. And then from that point, I kind of helped run their social media too, did a lot of photography and video stuff. And it was a very good learning experience. A lot of that was, following Matt, and then he left for a different opportunity, and he kind of I did a lot more stuff on my own, which is definitely very rewarding. I think that was probably where I learned the most about just photography and editing and video stuff. So definitely a unique experience. Working for Joey was super cool. He's a super great guy. Drivers say what he will about him, how he drives on the track and how he is off the track. Off the track, he's a super good guy. And so definitely a super cool experience, kind of like my first big like motorsports opportunity. So definitely grateful for what I was able to do there.
Well, earlier in the show, we talked a little bit about your home state of Minnesota. Your hometown of Minnetonka has a population, I understand, around 53,000, while Charlotte, North Carolina continues to inch closer to 1 million. So it's two completely different worlds there. When people really want to be involved in NASCAR, a lot of times they look at moving to the Charlotte area. I know that's certainly a major goal for many. So for anyone out there who's interested in moving to Charlotte to pursue their NASCAR dreams, what advice would you give them based on your own personal experience?
Yeah, I think it depends what you want to do in racing, because I think you got to have a goal of what area or what your end goal is. Honestly, it's a lot to do, and you gotta work hard and you got to meet the right people. But I think just focusing in on something like if you're into photography, like you got to get yourself a camera and you just got to go shoot. Even if you're not shooting race cars, just take photos, go out and take photos, volunteer early on. Like if there's a local racetrack, even before you move to Charlotte, if there's somewhere near that you can just go and just volunteer your time just to get the experience. And you never know who you're going to meet at those. Just talk to everybody, shake everybody's hand. Just remember people's names. Just even if you just remember their faces, networking is such a big thing. Once you get here, kind of the same deal. Just take whatever opportunities you can get. Don't say no to anything. Finding stuff that you want to get paid to do, even on like the media side, is always going to be tough at first. So just taking advantage of opportunities. And if you're even going to school here, whether it's UNC Charlotte or if you're going to the local community college or if you're going to App or whatever it is, find experiences that aren't just in racing, because there's stuff you can learn in racing that can apply to other things and vice versa. So just getting yourself out there and doing whatever you want to do as much as possible, because ultimately all the skills that you're going to bring up you can use in all sorts of different range. So if you're wanting to work as an engineer or crew chief, like again, go to a local short track, find a local team. Even some of the smaller NASCAR teams, go volunteer your time. Even if you're just like cleaning parts or you're just, running errands or whatever, just get your foot in the door, because you never know who you're going to meet.
Well, I think when we're all kids, we dream of reaching a point of being able to say, I've made it. And like you were saying, Ben, en route to getting their foot in the door, people can go through a lot of successful moments and some low moments as well that challenge them along the way, but sometimes getting that foot in the door is really all you need to lead to an opportunity to go on and do bigger and better things. So I want to ask you, have you reached a point in your young career that makes you say, I've made it? And what advice would you give the younger version of yourself when you were just a fan dreaming of working at a company like Dirty Mo Media?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say like, I think my experiences, like as far as like if I was a kid saying I get to like go to a race, let alone like work a race, because like the closest race to us was either Iowa or like the Xfinity Road America race. So even just going to a race was super cool. I think I went to my first one when I was 10. So let alone like being able to like travel to races and work, that has been like super cool. I don't know if I'd say I've like made it, because you never want to say like you don't know like what your end goal is going to be, and like you always want to find more. I think I've been very thankful for the opportunities that I've gotten and just taking advantage of it. Again, kind of like I said, if you're young and you want to get into it, just immerse yourself into it. If you want to write, just start writing, and even if nobody's seeing your stuff, just get the practice and just keep doing the reps, because again, if you opportunity calls where you do get something, you want to be able to show your work. So it's definitely been a roller coaster for sure, but never know what your future is going to hold. So definitely, I think I'm pretty happy where I'm at. So.
Well, I know you're certainly with a great company. I've been a Dirty Mo Media fan for a long time myself, listened to their podcast, and I think what Dale Jr. and Mike Davis and the whole team over there have continued to build has only gotten bigger and better all throughout the years. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what the team puts together here in 2023 and beyond. So I know you're in good hands there.
For sure. Yeah, it's kind of cool, because I feel like I'm just such a small part of it. And But yeah, the whole team is definitely just the amount of podcasts they're adding just the past few months with the Denny podcast, and they have the Steve Letarte podcast, and a lot of other things that are in the works, which is like super excited to even just be a small part of it. And yeah, so even what Mike Davis, just his goals and stuff for the future, I think it really shows that they're really trying to build something big, and I think it's going to be very big in the future. So
Yeah, well, I think I just saw this morning. Obviously, this will go up sometime next week. But when we're taping this, it's Thursday, February 9th. I just saw that Dirty Mo was supposed to go live on YouTube this morning, but Steve Letarte was taping his new Dirty Mo Doe podcast and was running a bit overtime, so they had to delay the live stream. So I guess that just speaks to the passion that he's going to have with this new project as well. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that one should be good. It's going to be their like Dirty Mo's like first kind of vet in a sports betting, which is definitely something like, as you guys probably can just tell, like that industry is just gigantic. So I think Steve is gonna be a great guy for that. I haven't seen any like previews on it on kind of what they're planning to do with it. But yeah, I'm super excited for that as well, because I've wanted to get in sports betting. So I think it'll be a great outlet to do that.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time. We're going to bring Kobe back on here for some final thoughts and some final words here, and we'll close out the show.
Yeah. And before we close out the show, Ben, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about one of the podcasts that you just mentioned. You know, Actions Detrimental with Denny Hamlin. I know, mentioned a little bit about it at the beginning, but although it's new, it's very impressive to see how it's shot up there in terms of popularity already. So I wanted to get your opinion on this subject. So like, what makes, like Denny Hamlin, like as a person, so so popular in everything he has to say. So like, when you're looking at Denny Hamlin, like people are just drawn to what he has to say. As I mentioned at the beginning, he's unfiltered, he's bold, and he'll give you an honest take. Whether you like it or not. Like in your opinion, why do you think his new podcast, Actions Detrimental, has shot way up there in terms of popularity in just his infant days?
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys. I'd put him in the category of like Kyle Busch, if you either love him or hate him. So his diehard fans are going to go there to see what he has to say, but I think the people that don't like him are still going to listen and see what he has to say and see if he's got any beef with whoever. So yeah, even when he went on Door Bumper Clear, I think he did such a great job on there, and he gets the banter. He's a driver and an owner, so that perspective I think is huge. And obviously, being as successful as he is, he can have a lot of authority with what he has to say, and he's not afraid to speak his mind. I think even on Twitter, it's like it seems like once a week there's always something he's throwing out there that's definitely going to be controversial just for anything. But I think it's great because ultimately everybody wants the best for the sport, and I think having personalities like that to put their voice out there on the internet and wanting change and just wanting the best for the sport, I think is always going to be the best. So yeah, I think that's going to be well. His co-host Jared, I think, is a great pairing with him. He also a fellow UNC Charlotte alumni. So yeah, I think that's going to be a very, very fun podcast to follow through the season.
Yeah, it's for sure. Really excited to check out Actions Detrimental throughout the seasons. Hear what Denny Hamlin has to say, because whenever he's talking, people are certainly going to listen. I know on his most recent podcast, his most recent episode after the Busch Light Clash, he talked about the safety changes that NASCAR made to the rear clip, and how NASCAR was actually touting the progress they made. But Denny, NASCAR probably doesn't want to hear this, but he said, the hits that they were suffering, the clash at the lower speeds, it still hurts. So basically, the drivers haven't really seen any changes, especially from Denny's opinion. We've seen Kyle Larson talk about that as well, and Bubba Wallace. So it's going to be interesting to follow that story as we move on throughout the rest of the NASCAR season. And if we get to some of the fastest tracks and the hits are still hurting there, I'm sure Denny's going to be even more open and honest about his thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, that one was super interesting because they talked about it on Door Bumper Clear a little bit. I'm assuming they got that information from Denny as well before they did their podcast. The next gen it's a very interesting, safety debate because, you talk about if they really took a step back with the previous car, even the COT and the Gen 4 car, how much safety, I guess from the Gen 4 to the COT, a lot safer, but Yeah, that's interesting because you talk about the rough hits, and also there seems to be a lot of guys maybe carbon monoxide poisoning too. So if that's something new that they did, I know they kind of reworked some of the exhaust system, and I don't know if the mufflers really had anything to do with that too. So I think that's very concerning because, like you said, you get to Daytona and Talladega where they have those big wrecks. Like, how bad is that going to be? And even last year they kind of showed with the smaller hits are what worried people, not the big hits. The big hits that seemed to be fine, but the smaller hits, they just didn't seem the cars didn't seem to crumple up enough to really absorb enough of the hit. So they're be interesting to see kind of how that's going to develop over the season.
Yeah, for sure. And we know NASCAR has been a strong advocate for safety for so many years. And if the changes with the do-rig clip still aren't good enough, I'm sure they're going to continue working and seeing what they can do to improve moving forward to make sure that all of those drivers can go home at the end of the day to all their loved ones and not suffer any injury like we saw last year with those concussions, Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman, and then also the foot injury that Cody Ward suffered at Texas Motor Speedway, I believe. So certainly it seems like safety is going to be a major part of the conversation this year in NASCAR as well. And Ben, we certainly want to thank you for joining us tonight on Life on the Grid. We encourage all of our viewers to follow Ben on social media. We've included his link tree in the video description below and a link to the Dirty Mo Media website so you can explore all the great podcasts and content on there. Follow Grid Network all over social media as well. If you like today's show, you can consider investing in the Grid Network by joining our Patreon. We'll give a big shout out to Colin, Mark, Deshelle, Robin, and David for being our loyal Patreon supporters. Without you, none of this would be possible. So thank you so much. Click on the link below to join our Patreon or buy me a coffee for a one-time donation. Ben Walton, before we let you go, any final words?
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. I appreciate it. I follow your guys' stuff kind of throughout the week and everything. Think you guys are doing great. Keep up the good work. Neb Notlaw. I'm pretty much Neb_Notlaw on all my social medias. Follow Speed Street, Dirty Mo Media, Door Bumper Clear. Those are kind of my main projects I do. So
Ben, thank you again. I just sent you a follow on Twitter myself.
I just saw it.
Yeah. Good to connect with you there. But thanks again for coming on our show today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys.